Welcome to the Nausea River podcast. I'm Theo Morgan, and sit at the table with me for a story. I just ordered some apps. 13 or 14 years ago, I was driving with my mom up to St. Anselm's College in New Hampshire for a tour. I didn't end up going there, but from the passenger seat, I looked out the window to admire the fire-colored autumn leaves, and I was in the middle of listening to Septicflesh's Revolution DNA album on my iPod. Released in 1999, it's arguably their worst album, but it is catchy. I love Septicflesh. It was the perfect time to love Septicflesh back then. The reunion was still pretty decent, and The Great Mass was either new or just around the corner. And I had over a decade of trying to convince normal people that Septicflesh actually make very beautiful music. One half of their career making unusual atmospheric death metal, and one half making lush symphonic metal. I like both eras equally for what it's worth. Septicflesh welcomed me back to live music in 2024. If they could break through my intense anxiety around indoor spaces in a post-COVID world, then they truly are my favorite band. Their live show, an all-too-short support slot with Decapitated, had more than just music for me, but after whatever hurt me, the only cure was more live music. My straight-laced religious parents egged me on, too, maybe not realizing I'd take the bait. 5 to 8 shows every month now. Why not start a podcast, too? That's at least as impactful as a revenge body and skincare routine. And that's the route that led me to seeing my missing half at O'Brien's pub earlier this January. The small pub was packed that night, ready for melodeath shredding or IQ-lowering pizza thrash from drive-by bukkake. It had a guy I went to high school with, a guy who watches all my Instagram stories, a guy who kept getting suggested to me as a Facebook friend, and of course, most of the members of Averst, and plenty of new faces too, even in a crowd of around 50 people. In that, I decided to crash a conversation. Okay, my name's Theo. Who are you?
I'm Dan. I am Boston-based. I feel like a nerd describing myself like as a multi-instrumentalist, but I guess that's technically true because I play bass, keys, guitar, a bunch of different bands. I just do a lot of stuff, I'm always busy.
Yep. And I've seen your Metal Archives credits.
It's a long list. Somehow.
Yeah, Meet Dan Saillant. Anyways, back to the past. He noticed my t-shirt because I had to rep my best friends forever in Glacier, and the big No Happy Music slogan is more recognized in Boston than I expected. He's charismatic, but unassuming. Then he casually drops 4 or 5 different bands he's played in. Autumn's Ashes, Annihilus Mundi, Ice Giant, Perennial Quest, all sorts of niche names. He didn't end up going to the next Glacier show, but as I shambled into Koto and Salem a week later, barely keeping it together, Dan was setting up stage for Autumn's Ashes, 6-string bass in hand. Yes, I completely forgot I was seeing them live. We had a good laugh about it, and honestly had a much better night for that. So what's the point of the story in the end? The point is that there's always more Septicflesh. On February 28th in Worcester, specifically, I was under the impression that they had to limit their US touring due to the cost of visas, which I'd cry about but understand completely. I was freaking out when I couldn't logistically make the 70,000 tons of metal cruise work, as they were performing on it. No Septicflesh for years. On the contrary, they had less than a year of turnaround time. And unlike Brighton Music Hall, the talent agents at the Palladium are more open to having local openers. Annihilus Mundi was on the poster, in small print but legible to me. It felt like things came back full circle. Septicflesh is here again, and I get to attend as a connected music journalist instead of a slurring drunk. And my friend is on stage. The story of how they got there is pretty interesting, at least. Enter the band, with a complete live lineup, and Dan Saillant's time to shine. I hope you enjoy. Well, I wanted to ask first, Annihilus Mundi, your band, good stuff, but what in your musical career has brought you to this point?
Oh, wow. So I've been doing stuff for a couple of years at this point. I used to, before the pandemic and really even before college, I was mainly active in the Rhode Island scene. because I'm from there originally, and I lived
Oh,
there
cool.
up until college. And then I didn't really have aspirations really for quite a while because you grow up like seeing all these images of like crazy wild rock stars doing crazy wild rock stars things, and you're like, no, there's no way that's not attainable in any capacity. So I was content in just like hanging around playing a gig at a bar every couple of weeks or something like that. And then post pandemic, my not Annihilus Mundi, but my other band, Ice Giant, came around. And Ice Giant has goals. We want to be like a proper like national touring act, and that doing like first gigs out of state, things like that with Ice Giant made me think like, oh, wait a minute. This is not only a ton of fun, but like I could totally do this. So I you've seen my Metal Archives page. There's about 40 million bands since 2020, roughly. So I've tried a bunch of different things. Annihilus Mundi is one of my longest running projects because it started off as a solo group. And then eventually I was just like, hey, I have this album that's been written and I've been kind of just sitting on it. You know what? I want to finish it. So here we are. So I started working on finishing that recording, got a lineup together so it wouldn't just be me with a laptop, things like that.
Yeah. So I mostly did my research on Annihilus Mundi because, yeah, that's the one that has the big event coming up. Sorry, we had lost some audio in between this. Onwards and upwards. So I think if there's something I want to rehash, it is the story of how Annihilus Mundi came to be. That's the important part.
Yeah, totally. So when I was before college, maybe I'll actually take this opportunity to tell it in a slightly less convoluted way.
Okay.
But when I was in high school, I had a couple of active bands and a bunch of friends, and we just jammed together. And then when I went to college, I went to BC, which is a Catholic school. Catholic schools, not a ton of weird death metal people to hang around. And also, I was in another state, so most of my friends that I jammed with regularly, I didn't have access to, and I didn't really have a group of people to do metal stuff with at BC. I realize in hindsight now that I totally could have just joined a punk band in Alston or something like that, but, didn't think of it at the time. So my solution to being metal deprived was to just do it myself. So I did research on like, okay, is there a precedent for one-man bands? And of course there totally was. I just wasn't aware of a lot of them at the time. And I pirated so much software. Like almost everything on that album is either free or pirated. I've paid for everything now. In hindsight, I've paid my dues back. But the budget for Grief was $50. No, sorry, $150 because I bought a Scarlet Solo and a subscription to Bias Effects, and that was it.
And you already had you already had instruments that you were using.
Yeah, but the instrument that I had was the one semi-nice. It was an Ibanez 6-string bass, so it's like it wasn't like.
So does that mean
nice,
like guitars were programmed?
No, guitars. I did end up getting a guitar. I think it was like a birthday or Christmas gift or something like that. But it was an Ibanez Geo. It was like the $100 like bottom of the line cheapest 7-string you could possibly get.
Okay. So you're an extra strings kind of guy.
I am an extra.
Because I have, obviously I've seen you live with Autumn's Ashes, and I noticed your 6-string bass.
Yeah.
And I'm on, and like I think I just wasn't looking that hard. My mom's like, who's your friend that's performing? I'm like, that's Dan, the guitarist. No, I'm wrong.
Yeah, lots of strings. The story behind that is kind of, I wouldn't call it funny. It's just kind of stupid. But I started off as a 4-string bass person. As most people do, 4 or 5. And then in early high school, the band that I was in had a song, and it had one particular riff that it was dead simple, and I wanted to play it lower down on the neck because of the tone, because you get kind of a little more twangy when you're playing further down versus up. It gets a little bit muddier. And I really wanted to play it down there, but I couldn't do it because there weren't enough strings on the top. And then I learned, wait a minute, 6-string basses exist. So I bought a 6-string for that specific song. It was called Outcast. And we never played it live, and we never recorded it, so I bought it for basically nothing. But I ended up really liking it, and then I got into Dream Theater after getting a 6-string
Really?
bass. Because, yeah, I had the 6-string bass, and I was like, who do I know what bands play 6-string bass? I think I literally Googled 6-string bassists, and the first one that popped up was John Mayung, and then I got into Dream Theater after that, and it all went downhill from there.
I feel like that's an interesting first result to have, because I would have thought it would just be a bunch of gent bands.
Yeah, it probably was after that.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time, Veil of Maya was pretty popular. And I don't know his name off the top of my head, but he used to play a 7-string.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's now a 5-string guy.
I've never looked at a picture of Veil of Maya. I think my brother may have listened to them in high school. He's 29 right now, so this would have been not too far off.
Yeah, it was around that time.
And I feel like he did, because I think I mentioned something about the Cynic song, Veil of Maya, and he didn't care one bit.
I love Cynic.
Yes!
Cynic is so good.
Yes! I mean, like, it's not hard to find Cynic fans if you're talking to, metalheads. Oh, yeah,
totally. Especially anybody with a little, like, even the tiniest little leg in prog, you kind of, like, have to know Cynic.
Did you see Paul Masvidal's solo show like in late September this year? He did a solo set in the Middle East.
No, I didn't see that.
I didn't either.
I saw. I've only gotten to see. I was convinced for years that I would never see Cynic live because I was becoming a fan of them right as the breakup with Sean Reinert happened over Facebook.
Yes,
I was.
I think for me, I had been through the 5 stages of Cynic grief, because like they were broken up, then they came back for Trace Denaire, and then they broke up again. And I guess Cynic still exists. They're gonna be at Maryland Death Fest.
They do. I saw them on the Refocus tour with Atheist, who it was one of my favorite bands. Now featuring Boston bro Jerry Watunsky, which is awesome for him. He's in the band. Is he in Metrilogy? No, Ancient Death. That's his band. From around the Boston area. And of course, Cynic and Atheist being 2 of my favorite bands, when they announced that tour, I was like, holy shit, I have to go to that instant.
And I missed it. I'm kicking I'm punching drywall. I'm kicking puppies.
Oh my god, that was one of the best shows. I was so happy. I'd have died on the spot. Yeah. Oh, it was great.
You said that you had like jammed with friends when you were in high school. So that made me wonder, like, when did you get into metal?
Oh, I was always at least a little bit interested in it as far back as I can remember. My mom and it might have been my dad, I don't remember which, but one of them had like a burned mixtape CD. And one of the songs on that CD was Hero of the Day by Metallica, which is kind of an obscure Metallica song. I think it's on Load. Mm-hmm. And I always really liked that song. And then during Christmas time, we had the CD of Christmas Eve and Other Stories with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And we would listen to stuff like that, and I always thought it was pretty cool. But I didn't really get into it until I think, I don't know what year it was, but at some point I got a Nintendo Wii, and it had Guitar Hero 3 with it. So most of my music taste started with Guitar Hero 3. Then I have a vivid memory of this. 2008, Metallica came out with Death Magnetic.
Yes.
And
so
pretty much the only...
Yeah, so we were both there for that. And the
yep.
drama about its production.
Oh, yeah, which I didn't really understand the production drama until much later because I was 10 when that came out. But the only real Metallica song I had heard up to that point was Hero of the Day, and I was like, oh, it's going to be another album of stuff just like that. And no, it's not. It's like a pretty heavy album, but I liked it a lot. So I got into that, and then I fell down the Linkin Park rabbit hole, and I'm still obsessed with Linkin Park all these years later. Then like Avenged Sevenfold was another huge one for many years. I got into a lot of the old thrash bands around that time, like because I thought honestly that Avenged Sevenfold sounded a lot like Metallica at that point in their career. That was when Nightmare came out. And then I jumped from there pretty much straight into technical death metal, which is quite a jump in hindsight. But one of my friends, Michael, who does some guest guitar solos on Grief, if you notice two guitar solos that out of nowhere sound way better than everything else on that album, that's because it was me.
I mean, perhaps. It just means he's a good musician.
He's a really good musician. He texted me one day and was like, "Yo, dude, you got to check out this song," and it was "Omnipresent Perception" by Beyond Creation.
Okay.
And that song completely blew my mind because it's got ridiculous bass in it. It's a Dominic LaPointe fretless 6-string bass player. Crazy. I was like, bass can do that?
Have you ever played fretless?
Nice. I've picked it up semi-recently. Excuse me. It's always been something I've been interested in because of that album, specifically the Aura. And then like other bands like Obscura, Death, what is it, The Philosopher?
I was trying to think, like, is Philosopher the one with fretless bass? And I'm like, no, you can't tell the difference that much.
No, it's so bad.
I can't anyways. I'm just a dumb podcaster.
Yeah, that album is man, I wish the production was better, but it is what it is. Steve DiGiorgio. And then later he did Testament stuff also with a lot of fretless.
I didn't know he was in Testament, but I really like Individual Thought Patterns. It's a good album. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Death's discography is like bangers throughout.
Oh yeah, totally. I don't think they have anything that I would even consider mid.
No,
frankly,
not even a little bit. Because like some people say, Spiritual Healing's mid. No,
I love Spiritual
Healing. Spiritual Healing's really good.
Banger. Born addicted to cocaine. So good. Oh, I love that album so much. I have that. That was one of the first vinyls I ever bought too. I think I just happened to be at like a Newbury Comics or something.
Oh, Newbury Comics.
Yeah.
Oh, I've missed. Well, I know Newbury Comics still exists, but I went in this past summer with my dad because we were just hanging out in Harvard Square before a concert, actually, because it was just like there's no queue at the Paradise, so it's like we're going on an adventure. So it's the Newbury Comics, and it's like they don't like it's so cutesy now. There are a lot of like squishmallows there.
Funko Pops,
a nice little shelf of vinyl, but not a ton. And all I can think is like this place used to sell sex toys and cock ring soap and full body fishnets. It's just like they gentrified Newbury Comics. They normified it.
You still have Spencer's, but like, come on.
Spencer's is not the same as Newbury Comics. If anyone insinuated that, I would have slapped them.
Yeah, no, it's not even close. Hold on, I'm just grabbing a battery.
And it's because you can't get music at Spencer's.
Yep.
That's it.
I wish it's on my bed back there, but Spencer's does I love most of their t-shirts and some of their weird horror merch. I have a Terrifier sweatshirt that I've been wearing around.
I will say that like Spencer's and to some extent Hot Topic, like if you were some kid in the suburbs who could never get to concerts, you know, in the 2000s and even early 2010s, online shopping was a lot more of a chore. And I didn't have a credit card. My mom was like, you're not gonna buy the Cannibal Corpse shirt with my card. What the fuck are you talking about? But like, you know, Spencer's and Hot Topic at least had some shirts. You could get like a Children of Bodom shirt. I first got into metal through Nightwish. So I spent years like at Hot Topic hoping that a Nightwish shirt would come up because some people said they saw them and I'm like, come on. And they never did. I did have to order that one online behind my mom's back.
Well,
And
that's not anywhere near as bad as Cannibal Corpse.
it's
So.
not as bad as Cannibal Corpse, but like she for a while she just didn't like my music at all. And
Mhm.
now she's an avid Nausea River listener, so there's
Very
character
nice.
development everywhere. Do your
They're
parents
supportive,
listen?
but
They don't listen to your music. They've
they
never
they
come to a
will
live show.
they will come to shows once in a while.
Okay.
They'll just complain about how
Yeah.
all the screaming. Why do you have to do all that screaming? I'm like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. I don't know every parent's reaction. I know we were talking about Glacier some weeks ago when we were just
Yes.
chilling at the My Missing Half show.
Mhm.
And I did go to that Glacier show on 31st. It was great. But I was talking
That's
to the guys because I am friends with them after interviewing them. And they're like, our
mhm.
parents were at the release show. And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. Because I
That's
showed my
nice.
dad, and I showed my dad their music, and he actually really liked it.
I think my mom would probably like them. Her issue is almost entirely just with screaming
Yeah,
vocals, harsh vocals of any kind.
that's my dad's problem too. He's not a harsh vocal fan. But
Yeah.
like if I find something that has good clean singing, I'll send it over to
Mhm.
him. Now my dad's always been very supportive of what I listen to. Despite the whole harsh vocal thing, he did take me to
Mhm.
an Opeth show. This also goes back to Newbury Comics because it was an acoustic show they did at Newbury Comics in Leominster.
Really?
That
That's cool.
it's one of the craziest.
Wait, I know I didn't go to that, but I
Oh.
was having a conversation about that semi recently, and I think we watched YouTube videos of it or something. My
So
roommates.
depending on the video you watch, you can see my dad in the corner. Some guy with like salt and pepper hair. For the acoustic show, he's like, I love this. And
Yeah.
he actually liked Opeth's prog albums, like the full
Mm.
prog stuff.
I
But
also like that stuff.
once he realized that like they were a death metal band for half their career, he's like, oh.
Yeah, go back, hear Deliverance, Ghost Reveries, like, oops,
Yep.
maybe not.
So you just had your first show with Annihilus Mundi. How was it? I'm sorry I missed it.
It was so cool. I had a lot of fun. We actually had two now because
Ooh.
we did on the night of the 31st. I would have gone to that Glacier show, but we had a basement show that night.
Okay.
So we've done two. The first one was at Kodo Lowell, which was my second time playing there. Fun story actually about Kodo Lowell. This was just a genuine miscommunication, but it ended up being a funny story. My Annihilus Mundi's first show ever, back when I was still doing solo stuff. It was about a year ago at this point, a little bit more than that. It was just me with a guitar and a laptop. The first ever one was supposed to be at Kodo Lowell, and it was going to be either the opening weekend or the weekend after it opened or something like that. And I was so excited because it was the first Annihilus Mundi show, and we got to the venue the night of the show, and it was still closed because they were still building the inside, and there was a miscommunication, and they didn't tell us that they had canceled the show because they had to delay their opening another week. So that was amusing, but it's okay because we got to do a makeup a year-ish later, and I had a full lineup at that point. So
Yeah.
it was really cool. We got pretty good video of the whole thing. There's a video on my YouTube channel, or not mine, the band's YouTube channel, of acceptance from that show, which was awesome. I love that video. It came out so well. And then we did the basement show a couple of weeks ago, and that was at Eric from the Spiral Continuum's house. So the actual first Annihilus Mundi show actually was there, but still a solo thing at that point. Because it was supposed to be Kodo, and then that got canceled. So then the next one was the basement show. And then later we did the same basement and Kodo, both with full lineups, which I thought was kind of fun little poetic full circle sort of thing.
Yeah. What's Kodo Lowell like? Because I've been to Salem, as you know.
Yeah. It's the food menu is the same, which is legendary. Yeah. They're incredible.
Yeah,
the drink menu is the same.
I messed up by not ordering any food there. It's just like this is your first metal show, like truly in a restaurant. This isn't like the Middle East where there's a clear line, and I'm like not really hungry.
Yeah, and next time, trust me, their sushi is unbelievable. It is so good. They put so much work into making it really, really, really good. So highly recommend. Kodo Lowell it's all the same stuff. It's just a wider open space.
Okay.
It doesn't have a proper stage like the Salem location does, but it does have a little raised part of the floor, and they have a PA mounted in the ceiling there, so the restaurant portion closes at a certain point. They'll block off the back, move the tables as they do at Salem,
Okay.
and then turn that slightly raised part into the stage.
Interesting.
So
then.
it's a bigger room, but it's very nice.
Yeah, because I was like looking through like articles about it, and the way they described it sounded like they had separate rooms. I'm like, okay, that takes away the charm of having a fucking sushi roll while I headbang.
There's 3 floors. To my knowledge, the second and third floor haven't been used for shows yet. Maybe they haven't. I just don't know about it. But the first floor is the restaurant with the small venue, and it's all one room, like how Salem is. Then the second floor has another slightly bigger venue, and then the third floor, I think, is like a full, like a Palladium upstairs size venue. But I have not been to either of those yet, so I don't know what those are like.
So what's it like? What's it like being with the full lineup right now?
It's really cool. It's fun because there's something completely different about playing with like backing tracks live, because it's 100% that your backing tracks are always going to be correct because they're printed audio files. So you're playing to a computer basically, and that allows your physical performance to come through, I think, a lot better because you don't have to split your attention really. And there's something nice about that. But there's a completely different dynamic to like actually putting people into the positions like drums and guitars and things like that, because you get to first of all hear how people interpret the parts slightly differently, and like it's just the energy bouncing between different people. It's a completely different experience. I love it. I think it's sounding really good, and I have to give massive props to the musicians too. Like Andre is a master. He's incredible. And then I've played with Davey and Chris, the guitarists, in a couple of different bands. Like Davey and I are in Perennial Quest together. Chris and I were in semi-past tense, I guess. Chris is his main band is Graveborn, but he had a side project, Scourge of Eltar, that had one show ever, and I was the live bassist for that. So he and I had played together, so we had experience there. And then Noah, I was with him for like close to 2 decades at this point. So I know him and how he works, and he's also the harsh vocalist on Reef as well. So he knows the music, and he's had the music in his head almost as long as I have. So everybody up there is a great musician. I trust all of them, and they have all been doing an incredible job, and I am so happy to have them.
That's
because
good to
it makes the experience awesome.
Yeah, it's good to hear because obviously, like, you're a very friendly guy, at least from what I can tell. But like, I was wondering if there was like a social hurdle to like having to like going from working with yourself, where you're the only person you have to deal with, to having to deal with other people. But then I remembered, like, you are in other bands. It's not just it's not all solo stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting having other people in Annihilus Mundi, because as long as that's existed, other than Noah lending his voice to the album, that has only just been like me. So there's interesting hurdles where now I'm having to notate parts for the first time ever, because I never had to do that before because I wrote them and I know them, and I thought for a while that I was going to be the only one that ever played them, but now I'm having to like show, okay, how do you play this riff to somebody else? And we're of course in a stupid tuning. We're in drop G sharp. So everybody's having to find the technical adaptation there, because it's a little bit of a weird tuning.
It's the first time I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's technically it's 7-string drop tuned and then everything down a half step, so it's not really that low or anything. It's just not a super common tuning.
It doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like you're doing brutal death metal drop B nonsense. No,
it's nope. It's just I like the sound of the low chuggies.
That's fair.
It's the latent periphery fan in me. Blatant Meshuggah fan, really, is what it is.
I know Meshuggah is still popular, but like if I'm a Meshuggah fan, I can carbon date when you got into metal.
Yeah, I love Meshuggah so much. I got into them a little bit later, because by the time I got into them, Bleed was already like a meme song.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, but can you play Bleed? It's so hard. And I was like, is Bleed really that hard? And yeah, it is. But I got into them really, I think, when Violent Sleeper Reason came out, which is 2015, I want to say.
Okay, so I'm totally wrong then. It's just like
that's just me being weird and getting into things late, but most of the time people that are obsessed with Meshuggah, it's like 2005, 2008, whenever Obzin came.
Yeah, Obzin was 2008, because I was at ground zero for that one.
Right, with Dex Magnetic.
Yeah, 2008. I'm trying to remember what else was in 2000. 2007 had a lot of stuff. I just remembered one of the best songs is 2008, so we can seg into what we've all been waiting for, Communion by Septicflesh.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here. Septicflesh are having another U.S. tour.
Yep.
Second time in the space of a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're in, I think, Chicago right now, or Wisconsin.
But they're stopping at the Palladium on February 28th. And who else would be opening but you?
Yeah, I'm over the moon excited. I will say Septicflesh is a band that I have not been super into over the time. Like, I like them. Communion's an incredible album. And is that the album that Anubis is on, or is that the other one? That is, okay, yeah. It's a really good band, and I also really loved Modern Primitive too, the one that came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I have historically been more of a Flesh God guy.
That's like fighting.
But
I want to say it's fighting words, but it's just like, it's not that serious, because I still like Flesh God Apocalypse.
Yeah, totally.
I'd say even a lot. Like, at first I listened to opera, and I'm like, am I into it? And then it grew on me. It grew on me slowly.
Yeah, I think that Flesh God is nowadays, anyway, kind of like if Nightwish made death metal.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool. Their old stuff, like back in like the Agony days.
Yeah. I did really like the Agony, but like I hadn't paid attention to them for a while, because I think in my head, even with the Agony, it's just like, okay, poor man, Septicflesh.
Fair, totally fair. Septicflesh, they have always had better production, I think, which is great. Flesh God finally ended up.
Having listened to like all of Septicflesh's discography, it's just going to be a tangent on Greek extreme metal, but there's a certain sound that Greek death and black metal bands had, and some of it is that really sucks. Like, it doesn't suck in the same way that second wave black metal did, because with second wave black metal in Norway and whatever, like, they were trying to get the worst production ever. I don't think any of these bands in Greece were, but they have kind of a very fake sounding synths, somewhat weird echoey production, and like, unless you're like, I think with the exception of like Rotting Christ, no one had a real drummer. It was all drum machines, and that includes Septicflesh. And like, I will say with as a true fan, their early albums kind of sound like crap, but but the songwriting's so good.
Yeah, I'll have to deep dive those, because I think the earliest that I've heard is Anubis. So
they had a whole career before Communion, and they broke up after Sumerian Demons, which is Sumerian Demons is probably my favorite Septicflesh album. It bridges the two eras really well. But before that, they had, I'd say like the best albums to check out would be The Wheel and Aesoptron.
I'm gonna save these now. Oh, I actually have them in my currently playing. Amphibians, the thing that they just put out.
I do need to listen to that like tonight, because they dropped that almost out of nowhere. And also, you're gonna be hanging out in the green room with them or whatever. That's
gonna be cool. Yeah. So Aesoptron and Ophidian Wheel from
Ophidian Wheel. That's
yeah.
I don't want to call it the wheel. I forgot a whole word there.
Aesoptron. Yeah, I'll save these. totally.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they went back as far as 1990.
Yeah, they're old.
Wow.
And
Sumerian
they
demons.
don't play too much of their old stuff. Like I just I just found the set list from a show they just did in Mexico,
Mm.
and it's like all communion onwards with one exception, and it is Virtues of the Beast from Sumerian Demons, which is a really good song,
Mm.
so I'm not complaining.
Totally. I forgot so many of these albums, like Codex Omega. I forgot about that one. I love that album.
Great Masses. It's underrated. It was like it came out when I was like 16, 17, so very formative along with Communion. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I'll talk about bands where it's like you discover them right before or after they break up forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so sad. Septicflesh is the
like
opposite.
Cynic
I discovered them as they reformed, and unlike
Nice.
Cynic, they haven't done any dramatic bullshit. Like they're just like they made Communion. They're like, we can still do this.
Yeah, no hilarious over the top Facebook breakups.
Yeah. Yeah, so my question is, how did you get the spot at first?
Complete happenstance, and a big joke of luck, and also having some pretty good friends. So the way that it happened is the promoter for the show, the local promoter, Mike Karp, who runs Rambuticon Productions. They used to be based out of Rhode Island, and they still do a lot of shows there, Alchemy specifically.
Okay.
And I think Mike is now either the main talent buyer for the Worcester Palladium, or one of them anyway, because he does a lot of shows there nowadays. He posted on Facebook a couple of weeks ago looking for death metal bands for a show on February 28th. Tag your band below. He does stuff like that all the time.
And he didn't say who it was for?
He didn't say who it was for, and I didn't know what show was on that date. So I commented Annihilus Mundi, because we're a death metal band, and I want to play the Palladium. So I figured, all right, it's probably like a local showcase or something like that, not a big deal or anything. And then Dustin Black, I don't know if you know him, but he is Vanta Black is his current project.
Oh, okay. So he's I know Vanta Black, and I've seen Dustin Black like recommended as a friend or something. I'm like, I don't know this guy.
Yeah.
But I like, despite the last name, it's common enough that I just didn't think.
Yeah. He's a Rhode Island guy. I've known him for a couple of years. He had an old band, Sun Singer, that I played with a couple of times. And he's also a BTB guy, so we have the same bass, both bass nerds, bass sluts, as Alex Schofield would say. But he responded to my comment and was like, yo, Mike Karp, this is the band. So I don't know how Dustin knew. I'm assuming he must have just like listened to the music or seen the live video or something like that. But in any case, he gave us a shout out basically, and Mike knows Dustin, has played with Dustin a bunch, because Rhode Island guys, a little bit older than me, so they were playing together before I was really active. But Mike took that recommendation seriously, and we got to messaging, and then he was like, okay, do you think you could draw well for Septicflesh? What? Because I didn't know what show it was. So I was like, yo, yeah, absolutely. So initially I was really excited because XDO was on the show, and I've known XDO for a while, but then they just had visa issues, so they had to drop.
Yeah, I'm sad about that one.
Sad about that. But it is cool that the band that is replacing them, Storm Ruler, I have not known about them until recently, but any Dark Souls themed thing is a win for me.
That's what that is.
Storm Ruler is a sword that you get in. It's technically from Demon Souls, but it comes back in Dark Souls also. So
okay, yeah. I'll trust you on that.
They're very cool. It's a black metal band, like straight up black metal. It's awesome.
Okay, cool. So that's wild.
Yeah, it was completely crazy, and I was kind of losing my mind, and I didn't think it was going to be real until we got the okay to start announcing it. And I have that, like, I kind of didn't believe it until it became tangible when they shipped me the tickets that we got to sell. So we don't have to sell, but we should sell.
Yeah, I bought mine pretty soon after the show was announced because I don't care. Totally. It's opening. It's Septicflesh.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I told my mom, and she's like, "Didn't you see them last year?" And I'm like,
"Yeah."
I'm like, "Yeah, that."
Yes.
Yes, but they weren't They weren't the true headliners because they had to play before Decapitated. It's just like they're headlining now. It's at the Palladium, and I can get another photo with their frontman, and like I'm 50 pounds down now, so I'm gonna look a lot better. Yeah, so much for my question of, do you like Septicflesh? Maybe you will if you listen to more.
Yeah, no, I haven't had a ton of exposure to them, but what I've heard I do like quite a bit, so yes.
I think as someone who started out as in metal, like really liking symphonic metal, finding Septicflesh, like right as they reformed, that probably set a pretty good trajectory for me.
Definitely.
Or bad, but like I know, like one of my memories, it's back when iPod Classics were still sold, and I had one, and during my free periods I'd just kind of curl up in the study room and at my high school and listen to Communion again. I listened to that album so much. Like Communion, Great Mass of Death. It was just those two for a while. Like those. That's what I dare I say pirated from a blog spot.
We all did it.
Oh, I have a hard drive full of pirated music.
I submitted my own album to a piracy site. Like,
well, I need the story behind this actually. Yeah, if it's fun, if it's good.
Yeah, totally. There was a website, technicaldeathmetal.org, which I think still exists. And I used to use it all the time, and it's a piracy website, so it's just like downloads relatively high quality MP3s. Sometimes they were really crappy, but most of the time it was pretty good. And that was before I knew Spotify existed, and like late high school, and I didn't have any money. School, of course you don't. So the only way that I could really get good new music is either YouTube or pirate it. So I pirated a ton of stuff off of technicaldeathmetal.org. And then eventually when Grief was done a couple of years later, by then I had an Apple Music subscription, and I was like buying CDs and vinyls and stuff like that to make up for the amount of piracy. But by then I was like, you know what? I owe a lot of my music taste to this website. I'm just going to submit my own album to that website. So I did.
Oh my God. Yeah, I never used that site. I think at first, I'm glad I skipped over being a LimeWire user, because I work in IT, and I started my career when LimeWire was dying and FrostWire was rising from its ashes. And, every infected computer had either of the two.
Absolutely. Yeah, I missed that. But luckily, I got resoundingly scared away from downloading sketchy things onto computers.
Yeah.
So.
But my brother and I would use ForShared a lot because it had a good search function, unlike unlike Mediafire or whatever else. And the other one was Google Blog Search, because there were just 6 bajillion blog spots that are collecting obscure metal. And the third one, I don't even know if this was piracy. It was specifically like Finnish doom metal. It was mixeri.net, and like I had to learn and at least the Finnish vocabulary for download or like click here or whatever, just so I could get my shitty death doom demos.
Before the olden days when Google will just translate all the websites for you.
There wasn't any auto translate. And it was a pain in the butt to manually put it through. So I'm just like, I can learn these words. Now I forgot them. Yeah, things are different. Things are different now. I haven't like truly pirated anything in a while.
No, me neither.
I think like maybe in the days before like everyone and their mom was on Bandcamp, like it still existed, but it wasn't everyone that was on there. I'm like, I need this ripped in FLAC.
Or like the good old days of Reverb Nation.
Yeah.
I still have a Reverb Nation page somewhere. I haven't updated it in 15 years probably, but there's probably still some garbage on there that I posted when I was like 12.
Did you have a Metal Archives account?
I think I ended up making. Actually, no, I do have one, and it's purely because I remember whoever uploaded Annihilus Mundi to Metal Archives made some lineup mistake or something like that, or spelled my name wrong or something. So I made an account specifically so I could edit my own page.
Yeah, I'll sometimes notice errors with people I vaguely know, and it's just like, I don't want to seem creepy. I'm not doing that. Like, and I just don't have the time to ask everyone, like, can you verify your birthday? And it's just like, you know what? They don't need to know your birthday. Like, the last question I had written down was like just talking about other projects. We've talked enough about, like, and I say that your goal for Ice Giant is to be a national touring project, which I think that's commendable. And you've gotten halfway there to the Mississippi River.
The Mississippi River,
and
we'll have to get the.
It's not like there are tons of. It's not like there are tons of Midwest venues. Although I respect it when a band says, you know, we are stopping in Idaho.
Yeah. I've
seen a couple tours that are stopping, like, Morgantown, West Virginia. I know it's Eastern U.S., but I'm just, like, I think there was one where they weren't stopping here, but I'm like, you know what? It's, like, the only win West Virginia's gonna get.
Oh, yeah. There was, last year, Ice Giant toured in June, and the final routing for that tour ended up being completely different than what we originally planned. Originally, I wanted to do, like, a full loop of the East Coast and up the Midwest. Okay. So I wanted to get us, like, a Kansas City date, an Oklahoma City date, Des Moines, bunch of weird random places in the middle of nowhere like that, and then it ended up such that was too big of an undertaking, so we just did the East Coast again, and then that was when we did St. Louis also. How
are those routes determined? Because, like, when you think about it, that's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of venues that don't really talk to each other.
Yeah. So that is another hat that I have on, where I did probably about 2/3 of the booking for that. At our stage, we're basically booking everything ourselves. Okay. So it's actually, DIY touring is kind of nice because you have almost complete control over how brutal you want to be to yourself. So you can schedule basically as much as you feel you are capable of scheduling. Last year, the tour that we did was, I think, 13 dates. And that was the longest by far that we had ever done. And it is still to this day the longest that we've done. And it was a lot. It was quite grueling to put that together.
And that's 2 weeks. Hard. That's 2 weeks of playing when you think about it. Because, like, you see all these, like, 20, 30 date tours, and 13 doesn't look like a lot. But that's still a solid work month.
Yeah, it was 2 full weeks. The playing itself isn't even really the worst part of it. It's the driving.
Yeah.
Because most of these venues are, like, if you're trying to hit major markets outside of New England and New York,
they're far away.
Everything is 5 to 8 hours apart.
Yeah. And least. Like, even the drive from, like, let's say you're going Boston to New York City, that's 6 hours. It's
5-6 hours at least. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
depending on the traffic.
Like, I'm just someone who hates riding in cars, hates driving. So that's torture to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot, and booking is the hardest. I say this as somebody who has done it a lot. I haven't done every job in the music industry, so I don't really know that this is true, but from my experience, booking is the hardest job in the entire industry. And it's the most difficulty with the least reward, because the typical payout structure for a booking agent is either nothing if it's a DIY band and you're booking yourself, or if you're booking for somebody else, then you get 10 to 15% of the total gross of the show, which if you're at this level, like smaller DIY level, it's going to be like $10, maybe a beer, something like that. So it's email after email.
You go to Little Caesars.
$5 hot and ready. Like,
you get 2 of them with that.
2 of them, yeah. 2 whole pizzas to myself, I'll take it. But it's so much work for mostly not a lot of reward, other than you get to play a show. But most of the time, if you're in a new market, nobody knows who you are, so not a lot of people come to them. So
yeah, and booking is it's like the least sexy part of it.
It is a lot of work, and it's not fun, but it is necessary. And when it does result in really good shows, like actually our St. Louis show, that was awesome. That was a really good show.
Okay.
Act completely out of nowhere. We had a lot of weird experiences on that tour, because we started in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is a college town that I had never heard of.
I haven't either. This is news to me. Which college is it?
I don't even know. All I know is that it's a college town, and I only know that because people at the bar said that it was a college town. Although it was in June, so there was no college in session. But that didn't matter because it's also like one of those places. The place was just called the Tavern, and it was out of nowhere packed because I guess it's like the only bar that does metal shows in the area, so everybody that wants a metal show goes to that bar, even if they've never heard of the bands playing. Like Ice Giant, who's heard of them? Zebellian Triangle, awesome band. Nobody's heard of them, especially not in random middle of nowhere Mississippi.
I've never even heard of them, and
that was such a good show.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that band, and this is my hobby.
Yeah.
That's an interesting dynamic because in a way we are really spoiled in the Boston area, even in Providence if you think about it. Like, yeah, you lost Dusk and Boiler Room, Piece of My Heart gone too, but you got Alchemy, you got some shows at Fet Lounge,
the Parlor, News Cafe.
Yeah, like you got a few choices, just not tons and tons. It's not a huge city, and I think New England concert market's really, it can be a little weird, like bands choosing Connecticut dates. I don't.
A lot of dates in Wallingford.
Yeah, I'm always a little salty about Connecticut dates because like I can't get out there as easily.
No, it's so hard to access anything in Connecticut.
Yeah,
because any of the population centers where there would be a show is at least 2 hours from here.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's probably, but if you're, like, truly in Western Mass, you're probably doing backflips when that happens.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Or even if you're in Western Mass, Albany, if you get, like, an Albany show or something like that.
Yeah, if you're west enough.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, if you're, like, in Lee.
Mm-hmm. Pittsfield type vibes.
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, we are spoiled here. Like, I'll admit I don't think much about people who are in like rural areas or kind of no-name college towns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when places like that do show up though, because it's such a completely different vibe. Like we played the first 2 shows of that tour. The first was in Mississippi, the second was in Atlanta. Both very, very packed shows. And in both places, they were communities that everybody knew each other pretty well. The difference was that in the Mississippi show, getting a random metal show of a bunch of bands that nobody had heard of was part of the excitement of going to that show. Like, it was just a bunch of people that had never heard of any of us, had never listened to any of us, and just was like, yeah, this is a metal show, and it's at this bar that we like, so we're just going to go. And it was such an interesting dynamic in the crowd there versus Atlanta, which gets shows all the time. So you get people that know each other, absolutely, but they're also tuned into the scene because they know the local supports. They are at least a little bit familiar with the touring bands, especially because in the case of Ice Giant, our guitarist and singer, Olive, used to live down there for a little while, so she knows a bunch of people down there. So there was that aspect.
It's a bit of a bonus.
Yeah.
So you say it's like comparable to Boston, because like I see a lot of repeat faces.
Oh yeah, definitely. Or even like New York is a lot of the same sort of thing all the time. Because New York, very, very big place, but like most places, the metal scene is at least decently tight knit. So
that's interesting because I thought maybe New York would be the exception, just because you're dealing with 8 million people.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a lot bigger. and I think you have a much higher chance of people not knowing each other. But even still, the few shows that we played, like actually also on that June tour, most of the crowd that was at the venue was there because they knew they were friends with the singer of the opening band. So it was, a bunch of people that already knew each other, and they knew one of the local bands, and some of them were at least tangentially aware of us. So it's a cool little vibe.
Which band was that, by the way? Like the local one?
Plague Master.
Okay. I like to shout them out in the description.
Yeah, totally. Plague Master's fun. Their drummer Carlos has been a friend of ours forever. He's got another band, Solemn Vision, which is probably a bit better known. If you like Melodeath, then they're really good. They're up your alley.
Yeah, Melodeath is perfectly fine. Yep. That's great. So you seem to have a lot of friends, even nationwide, or at least East Coast wide.
Doing tons and tons of booking will definitely do that to you. The sheer amount of Instagram DMs and emails I've had to send is ungodly. Like probably I would venture close to tens of thousands by now.
Yeah, I'm definitely not there yet.
It's brutal.
Yeah, so have you booked all over the East Coast or?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice.
Pretty much every state on the East Coast except Alabama, which is technically not East Coast.
Yeah, whatever.
Close. And Florida. I've not done Florida.
I haven't done Florida. Yeah, Alabama. Well, I guess that's less out of. I guess that's less out of the box than Mississippi.
Yeah. Florida specifically, though, has some extra baggage because all of our singers is transgender, so Florida is not particularly nice to trans people.
I know.
So we have avoided that.
Yeah, that's gonna suck for a lot of bands.
Yeah.
I mean, just because, I think if you're an outsider to metal, you're not aware of how diverse it can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that a lot of I would like to think that most places that have heavy music type shows tend to skew more into the accepting area. There's actually also from that tour with Ice Giant last June, we played in Ridgeville, South Carolina, which is about an hour outside of Charlotte, I believe, or Charleston. Charlotte's in North Carolina, Charleston is South Carolina.
Okay.
So it's an hour outside of Charleston. Very, very rural, middle of nowhere. None of us on the tour package knew anything about the area. It was just some random thing that we had booked. And we were freaking out a little bit about Mississippi also because the other band that we were touring with, the Zebellian Triangle, they also have a trans person in the band. So both of us were like, don't want to fuck with places in the South too much because you never know if they're going to be accepting or anything like that. And Mississippi was totally fine, but we were worried about Mississippi and South Carolina because we didn't know the areas. And then we got to the place in South Carolina. It was the Ridgeville Roadhouse, like a literal roadhouse, like from the movie with, what's his name? I can't think of his name, the guy from the original Roadhouse. But it was literally like one of those, and they had a cigarette vending machine in there, and it was awesome. They got somebody to cater barbecue, and by cater I mean somebody cooked barbecue and then brought it to the venue. It was awesome. It was so cool.
These are stories you don't hear much. I guess even in even in the boonies of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I'm from Fitchburg. I don't think anyone's grilling up ribs at the Fitchburg Rod and Gun Club, but they should. Maybe someone should be listening and be like, "That's what next Fitchburg Metal Fest needs."
Yeah.
We get the rib dealer.
Yeah. We ended up having a really nice conversation with the venue owner that night, who I don't remember her name. I'm Lori. I'm Facebook friends with her. I could look it up, but
okay.
She was the owner of the venue. And she told us as we were packing up that she's from Brooklyn. And
Okay.
she moved to Ridgeville. So she was talking about how she grew up seeing and knowing and interacting with all sorts of different people. And part of her goal with the venue, the Ridgeville Roadhouse, is to bring in talent from everywhere with all sorts of different people and all sorts of different creeds and gender expression and race and things like that, because she views this place, Ridgeville, as a place that's kind of on the rise. And her exact words to us were that she wants to make sure that the locals that might be less accepting get exposure to people from other parts and other walks of life. So part of her goal was like, hey, this tour package has 2 trans people in it. That sounds like exactly the sort of thing that I would love to showcase at this venue, because that's a whole different life experience that a lot of people around me might not know about, which I thought was super awesome. And she was so nice. So that was really cool. So the 2 places that we were freaking out about a little bit because we didn't know them and they were in the South ended up being like super chill, which is great.
Yeah,
So
that's good to hear. And that woman, Lori, she sounds like an angel.
yes, yeah, she was so sweet. There is hope for the South.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's what kind of sucks about Florida, because I know a lot of
Mm.
great people from Florida because it's a huge
Yeah.
state.
Hmm. The
Yeah.
last podcast I was on actually was Turn Off the Thunder, I think was the name of the podcast. Brittany is the name of the host, and this was a nice giant interview when we put our album out a couple years ago. And she's from Florida, and that was, I think, right about when DeSantis started doing his thing. Then there was a lot of conversation about just,
Hmm.
there's lots of good people in Florida, and there's bad people everywhere, totally, but Florida seems to unfortunately have gotten a little bit of a
I think like
bad
they
hand.
got a lot of the worst crazies despite it, but
Hmm.
you'd probably like if you took 1,000 Floridians at random, they'd probably all be a lot of them would probably be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, I've, just like with the internet, I had a lot of like
That's
gaming friends and stuff from Florida,
yeah, totally.
and I mean, I don't like the heat, so I'm not gonna see them, but in theory,
I do, I do. I love it.
yeah, I sweat,
I'm a New England native, but I fucking hate the cold. I hate snow. I hate winter. Just ugh.
yeah. Once again, thank you, Dan, for talking to me, and catch all of us at the Septicflesh show on February 28th. Pray that they play Virtues of the Beasts there too, or at least Persepolis. I was really salty that they didn't do that last time. I'd say what are your parting words, but like, how would you sell people onto the Septicflesh show besides listing your top 5 albums?
I'm thrilled that Mike is giving a chance to a relatively new, not super well-known band. These songs that we're playing, I've had them in my head for a decade, but that doesn't mean anything because nobody else is in my head. So I have confidence in these songs. Everybody that I've showed seems to have confidence in the songs because we're playing about half of the ones that we're playing are new. So
Ooh.
I think that it's going to be a really good show. We're bringing energy. We're bringing what I hope is really good music that I think a lot of people are going to like, and I am thrilled that a relatively new, relatively small band like Annihilus Mundi gets an opportunity like this. So I cannot wait. I am thrilled that it's happening, and I have tickets if anybody
Yeah.
wants them.
And all I can say is I'll be there. If I don't know how much hanging out time you get with the guys, but from what I remember, Seth and Krim were very nice.
Mm.
Maybe
Yeah,
a little,
I hope.
although they seemed very tired as well.
I'm sure
Because
touring
this is like it's like almost
pretty,
midnight.
yeah, touring is can be rough like that. So if they get time to hang out, I would love to
Yeah,
buy them a beer or something like that. So
yeah,
it'll be
yeah.
very exciting.
Hopefully, yeah. You probably at least get to see them like before the show, and not like
Hmm.
me where like I get to see some of my favorite musicians, and they're like, "Why is we're in our jammies? Why is this girl harassing us?"
Yeah, that post-show shower going.
Yeah. No, like
If, if the
like I
Woodstock
know,
Palladium is nice enough to have a shower.
Yeah, this is a Brighton music hall. They like it's tiny in there. Like I don't think they showered, but I do know they changed. It was just like tracksuits, full comfy. I don't blame them one bit.
No, I don't either.
Anyways, it was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. This was great, and looking forward to the show.
Yep. Catch either of us. Catch Dan's wonderful 6-string bass. Catch all the grooves, and catch my impeccable vibes. That's what I bring to the function. Good night, everyone.
Yes.